Dear friends, welcome to this week's edition of the Inspired Parsha. This week we have an incredible privilege to read through Parshas Beshalach. Like every Parsha in the Torah, there's so many beautiful, rich Torah ideas, especially in the Hasidic world. But I just want to focus on one pasuk, one verse. This week's Parsha is one of the most triumphant moments in the entire Torah, this great splitting of the sea. It was probably such a moment of such pure majesty, of witnessing God's revelation into the world. And we know what happened right after that. The Jewish people broke out into song, the famous song of Az Yashir, what we know today as Shiras Hayam, the song of the sea. And there's a very famous pasuk in it, a very famous verse. This is in Shemos, Exodus chapter 15, verse 2. Zeh keli vanveyu Elokei avi v'romamenu. This is my God, and I will glorify him, the God of my father, and I will exalt him. What's the deeper meaning behind this pasuk? If you look at it closely, it switches in the middle. It first says, this is my God, which is a very personal God, and then it says, the God of my fathers. The Sfas Emes jumps on this immediately, and he says something very beautiful. He says that we have two relationships with God throughout our life, with Hashem. Sometimes he's my God, my personal God, and sometimes he's the God of my forefather, meaning the God of our tradition, the tradition that's been handed down from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all the way till today. Which one is it? So the Sfas Emes says something really beautiful. He says that the real truth is both of them are equally important, because there are times in our life when we feel a personal connection to God. We want to get closer to him. But then there's other times, of course, when we feel distant from him. And during those times of distance, what do we have to do? We have to tell ourselves, okay, I right now don't feel like I want to get close to God at this moment. I'm going through a difficult time, but he's also the God of my forefathers. I've been handed a beautiful tradition all the way going back to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, always, all the way till today. So we have inside of us always these two possible relationships that occur throughout our lives. So people might sometimes ask, which one is more important? And of course, the answer really is both. Because try to imagine a tradition, try to imagine a Judaism where it's only about the tradition. It's only about doing things because this was the tradition that was handed to you by your forefathers. It would be a very dry, empty Judaism. It needs to sometimes be a personal Judaism too, a personal connection to God, a Zeh keli, this is my God. But also the other way around is just as important too, because imagine if it was only about having a personal relationship with God, if it was only about Zeh keli, this is my God. What about during the times when you don't feel his presence? Then you're going to be willing to throw it all away, because you're going to say, at this moment, I don't feel like I want to have a connection to God, therefore I don't want any part of it. So at that moment, you remember the second part of that pasuk, the second part of that verse. Elokei avi v'romamenu. This is the God of my forefathers as well. I have a beautiful tradition to uphold that's been handed to me by my parents, by my great-grandparents. I want to be a part of this tradition. So I always like to leave everyone with a bracha, a blessing. Always remember this dual role that we have, this dichotomy, that sometimes it's a personal God and sometimes it's the God of our forefathers. And to always live with that, because there will always be moments when we need both. And when we realize that we have both of these in our lives, we'll be able to live our lives with a much greater fulfillment, a much greater sense of purpose, and a much deeper connection to God, to Hashem. Wishing everyone here a wonderful Shabbos Kodesh. Thank you so much for listening.